Welcome to another episode on the People Productivity channel, where you are the product and a better you is a solution. We have on an incredibly interesting guest today, Dr. Scott Blaise. He's a hypnotherapist. And what we're going to talk about is hypnosis and neurolinguistic processing. And these are both fascinating topics because we're really going to talk a little bit about the subconscious. People have a lot of, quote unquote, head trash that they deal with, things that were laid down in the first 6 or 7 years of their life as their mind began to record what it is to be human and to learn to live as a human. And you can't really access that area very easily and rewrite those programs. People pick up bad programs during life, oftentimes during traumatic events and other things that can write areas of the subconscious. And when you consider that many people go through life and 90% of their day, their subconscious is what is driving and controlling most of what goes on. Nothing could be more important than being able to actually have the best possible programs running for you to guide your life. And so we'll get into this. This will be really interesting. And actually, we're going to have, Dr. Scott back on in probably another month, because this is a really interesting topic. It's a deep, topic, and it's also a very important topic to you because a better you is a solution. And so, hey, Scott, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, Frank. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, my name is Scott Blaise. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist centered in central New Jersey, out of East Brunswick and South Brunswick. We deal mostly with anxiety disorders, weight loss, and academic and sport performance. And we're very excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. Why don't we just start with the basics? What is NLP and why does it matter?
Well, NLP stands for Neurolinguistic Programming. It originally started in the early to mid 70s. And it basically was taken from 3 famous therapists, each in different lines and modalities. And 2 gentlemen basically, long story short, went to them and said, how do you do what you do? Why are you guys so great and are effectively helping people when no one else can? Their answer, in short, was they really couldn't explain it. There wasn't a model of understanding to say, hey, this is my process, this is what I do. So it was almost as if it was innate. Well, long story short, these gentlemen developed basically models of communication. They modeled them, they studied them. This happened over a several-year process. And they basically came up with 2 main models, the Milton model, which was primarily modeled after famous hypnotherapists. I consider probably one of the best ever, Milton. And they also looked at people like Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, which then subsequently formed the meta model. Each model has its place, each model are effective tools, and it's used every single day, not only in just hypnosis and therapeutic circles, but we use it every single day in face-to-face communication.
Well, not only do we use it without realizing it, but the reality is that, marketing firms caught on.
Absolutely. Are using it all the time.
They use it all the time because they want to understand how people respond to different words, phrases, language, how to piece it together and influence others' behaviors with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, politicians use it all the time. I mean, you look at the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Well, what's great? What's going to be great for me is going to be completely different for what's going to be great for you. And they understand that. And that's actually a very, very famous, Milton model pattern.
Yeah.
Ambiguity. So, when you have something that's ambiguous, something that's vague, what our mind automatically does is we have to fill in the blanks. And we fill in the blanks with our own past, our own experiences to make sense of what we're hearing, to make sense of that information we're receiving.
So in terms of our audience and their ability to understand what this is, right? Why is it important that they should know this or something about it?
Well, one of the main importances lies in the fact that when looking at face-to-face communication, it's not really what you're intending. It's not really what you mean. It's how it's being interpreted. As example, you came up to me and I commented on your shirt, and you took that as an insult. So the question lies is what I said an insult, or was it interpreted as an insult? Well, the truth lies in, I might not have meant and I didn't, you should, certainly my intent wasn't insult you, but if you took it as an insult, then what I said was an insult. There's no other way to look at it. So we have to be very, very careful in understanding that what we are saying, what we're communicating, is not being perceived and received in the way that we actually intend it to be. And this is where miscommunication happens. This is where conflict begins.
Mm-hmm.
And then people, because of those programs that you said, they keep on firing back in that same frame, in that same language or tonality, and they get frustrated that they're not receiving the results that they expected. And then, from there, it's just a big old mess.
Yeah. Life is a little bit more complicated in some ways because the human complexity is real. It enters into everything.
Absolutely.
So then we get into hypnosis, which is a little different. Why don't you explain to the audience, what hypnosis is?
Well, hypnosis it's a natural state of consciousness. It's a word that has a lot of negative connotation. I deal with it every single day. In our first session, I do very little hypnosis. It's basically sitting down and for me to discover and learn what I basically had just went over. Basically learn how you're processing information, learn how that's internalized. What words and how do I need to frame my language in a way that it can get understood in the way that I mean it. And then it also get absorbed by the unconscious mind. So hypnosis is a natural state. We go through it a minimum of 2 times every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Can't fall asleep without passing through a state of hypnosis. You can't wake up on the other end without passing through a state of hypnosis. So hypnosis is not REM. A lot of people will confuse it because the word hypno, it's Greek, comes from sleep. It's really not sleep. You may look at someone and they may visually appear that they're sleeping, but they're not. Your senses are heightened. You're more alert, and you're experiencing things that on an everyday basis you had not experienced before. The whole point of hypnosis is to basically occupy that conscious mind, for a few seconds to occupy that filter that's filtering out all this information, all this experience, so that we have a little bit of gateway and a little bit of access into where you said where all those programs are coming from, which is the more unconscious and subconscious aspects of the mind. And just getting in there and learning and unlearning and relearning whatever behavior is no longer serving you in a positive manner.
Yeah. So, just so the audience knows, that is the theta state. Correct. And as I said early in the introduction, we know that at least from, the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton and the people who went before him, I'm sure there were many others, but, the theta state, kids are in that till they're probably 7 years old.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're downloading what it means to be a member of this tribe, family, community, right? It's where they actually record a map of how to interact and behave with others.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that we do get into theta twice a day, and actually people who, use hypnosis can get people into that state and help them deal with, whatever programs they need to change, right? So I guess that's why it's important, but maybe you could elaborate on that a little.
Well, it really, to make it the most simplest way to understand, it's a system of knowns versus unknowns, which is exactly what you just referenced. During that absorption period from basically birth, and even before, we can get into the argument there, even prior to birth to 6 or 7 years old, where that child is in a constant state of hypnosis, and that's exactly correct. They are forming what you classified as maps, these internal maps of how they think their world, their economic status, their social status, everything that they're seeing and hearing is being downloaded and creating these maps and these programs. After that, and they start to grow up a little bit, and that ego and that self kind of springs through a little bit. Now, every bit of information, and science has already proven that any second there's anywhere from 2 million plus bits of information coming in through the human senses, the 5 senses. And what happens is we almost begin to filter that information, that incoming packets of information based on those maps. So we're generalizing, we're deleting, we're distorting all this stimulus based on what we think we should be seeing or hearing or tasting, or touching. And people don't realize that that's affecting their everyday. It affects their everyday lives.
Yeah, I forget the exact number, but I thought it was like 98.4% of the information around you is ignored.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So people are focusing in on this very small amount of stuff. And that is that famous, gorilla experiment, right? Where the gorilla comes, through, past the basketball player, waves at people and leaves. And over
Yeah,
half the people watching this,
basketball. Yep.
yeah, they say, I didn't see the gorilla come through because they've been told to watch the player shooting.
Correct. Yeah. Well,
And
they're told to watch the players in white. The gorilla's dressed in black, so they're filtering out any stimulus that's related to that color black, which is
yeah,
not important. They're filtering out. And here's the thing too. Generalizing, deleting, and distorting is important. It's a very, very critical aspect of human mind and human consciousness, because if that was not the case, by the time breakfast was done, you'd be so mentally exhausted, you'd have to go to bed again.
yeah,
Nothing would ever get done. So, as a filter for survival, we filter, generalize, and delete this information based on those maps during those formative years.
yeah,
So, when looking at trying to override an unconscious belief or an unconscious known with a conscious idea or conscious thought, 98, 99% of the time, it doesn't happen that way. It's very, very difficult to do.
yeah, nearly impossible,
It
actually,
is. I
right?
mean, it really is. I mean, people like, I want to stop smoking. Most people, I'm willing to bet. I'm sure it's not everybody, but the masses, I don't like smoking. It's getting expensive. I know it's not good for my health. A lot
Yeah.
of people find it disgusting, but yet again, they can't stop because during those years, at some point, smoking became known for whatever reason, and it got implanted and it got drilled in that subconscious aspect of the mind. And now, 30, 40 years later, they're still smoking and they can't stop.
Yeah, amazingly, my father was a huge anti-smoker. My mother and father didn't smoke, and I just never had a desire to do it. Whereas friends who grew up in families where their parents are smoking all the time immediately picked those habits up.
Yeah, I
And
was
then,
lucky. Both of my parents smoked. Both of my grandfathers smoked, but my grandmothers had not. But I was lucky, and both myself and my sister, we got lucky and did not pick up the habit. So, I'm
yeah,
definitely for that.
yeah, you were lucky. I was too.
Yeah,
Very fortunate that I didn't do it because the physiological aspect of that is, takes over. Obviously,
oh,
very
absolutely.
hard.
And it's not just smoking. We use smoking as a easy example, but
Yeah,
it could be anything. It could be eating. It could be our lifestyle habits, our health related habits. How we conduct our day, how we wake up in the morning and brush our teeth and make our coffee and do things in a certain manner. I mean, it controls, so much more of our lives than just, smoking and smoking related, challenges.
yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's relationships.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it comes down to everything. And this whole selective filtering, this 98.4% of the stuff being ignored,
Yeah,
is vital to survival.
it is.
As if you were taking all those stimuli in and you couldn't separate something that was a threat from something that was good for you,
Yeah,
obviously you wouldn't be around very long. So,
would not.
yeah. So it really, at the end of the day, it was really, really important. And this notion of the conscious versus the unconscious mind. And you know, people today, we hear these terms all the time, and people, I think, generally understand them, although they may not understand kind of the power of the subconscious. But
Hmm.
what's great is that we're heading to a time where more and more people are becoming
Absolutely.
aware of this and the fact that they may have some programs that aren't very good running, and they need to just really begin to go about changing those.
Well, the critical thing there is, every behavior that we adopted at its core had a positive intent at one point.
Mm.
We're creatures of change. We're here to grow. We're here to experience. We're constantly changing. What we like to listen to, what we like to eat, what
Yeah,
we like to wear. I mean, it's always constantly developing. So we take a habit that 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, was being used in a positive manner, but is no longer positively, I guess, aligned with what their desires are and what they want 30, 40 years later. And that's what hypnosis is very, very good at. It's very, very effective and most times very quick to be able to get in there and just erase those unwanted behaviors. But, but not only that, but replace it with what they're looking to accomplish, what they're conscious desires and thoughts are at that particular point in your life.
Which is
And
fantastic. So with that, then, what are the three main areas where you see kind of the most effective and practical uses?
well, when with looking at hypnosis, and also NLP as well, there's basically three main stages.
Hmm.
You obviously have it under the therapeutic model.
Hmm.
You have it under, business and business management and relationship and sales. Then you also have it in the personal life, your romance, your family life,
Yeah.
inter-spouse communication, the communication with the kids. And I think today there's such a gap, between that line of communication between husband and wife, significant other, with their children, and it's forcing, families to almost segregate, to separate. Your son goes up in his room, he gets on his iPad, and the daughter goes in the family room, and she hops on a computer, and the wife goes in the kitchen and she does that, and we're leading these separate lives, but we're under the same roof, we're under the same household.
Yeah.
And it's because sometimes that communication is difficult to do.
Yeah. That whole notion of being alone together.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a lot of what life is for many people.
Walk down the street 60 years ago in America and look in the windows, and walk down the same street today, and you're going to see a completely different thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the communication. We're so focused on these electronic and, the modern technology, that we've lost the ability, and not only lost the ability, but lost the desire to have those personal and communication skills, and have those drive our lives and our behavior, rather than, oh, I wonder what's happening on my Instagram, I wonder what's happening on my Facebook. And even those things now, for the younger generation, that way of life, those behaviors are installed.
Oh, they're there.
Yeah, I mean, to wake up in the morning and to check your Facebook, and then go on your Instagram and go on and play a couple games of Scrabble and Fortnite, and then, I mean, those are programs that were installed. And as these individuals get older and have to, I guess, deal with that balance between life and business and relationship, it's going to cause conflict for a lot of these younger generations.
It's going to be difficult. And one of the ways that you can lay down a program is you create a habit.
Correct.
And after X number of days of doing a habit, you have a new program running that, let's say,
Correct.
you've never gone to the gym, you start going to the gym, you've gone for a few weeks, you wake up and, oh, I got to work out today. That program is running.
Correct.
And it pushes you in that direction.
Yeah.
So, these people have laid down, these digital natives from this generation, those habits of, I've got to check my cell phone every minute.
Yeah.
That's
I
a
even
really bad habit.
I mean, I'm one of the, I don't want to use the word old school, but I leave my cell phone in the car.
Yeah.
I go to the gym and I'm working out. I'm there to work out. I'm there for 35, 45 minutes. And, I observe and I look at people, and they'll do a couple reps in a set. They'll take a break. They'll get on their phone for longer than what the set was. They'll go back and do the set. And you see them every single day with exhibiting those same behaviors. Why? Because it's unconsciously driven. They think they're making the conscious choice, like, hey, I want to take a break and I'm going to go check my phone. But before they consciously decided that, the unconscious mind has already made up the choice for them. So is there really any choice? Most of the time it's no.
Most of the time it's no. 90% of the life is being driven by these programs, both good and bad. And
that's why I love hypnosis, because it gives you a tool to get in there and to change those programs and to rewrite those programs. There's different ways to do it. You don't only need hypnosis. Like you said, you can, through the force of attrition, force yourself to go to the gym for 21 days or 16 days or however long you need to form a habit. But, occupying that critical faculty, keeping that conscious mind occupied for a couple seconds, put them into a relaxed state, and just turn their focus inward, has amazing, amazing effects. And it's usually a lot quicker.
Yeah. And, listen, there are a lot of different tools and ways to do things in life. And, for some people, they're disciplined enough that they could say, I'm going to start working out.
Absolutely.
And they can do it. But for many people, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And it may go for 3 days and then stop, right? And, health clubs have relied on all of these memberships where people don't show up forever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is their business, that you're not going to have the discipline to do it. So whatever program is running in you that makes you do things other than working out is really affecting, your health over time.
Well, even myself, for example, during these social distancing and lockdown times, I said at the beginning, okay, I'm going to use this time positively. I'm going to read X number of books. I'm going to do X number of things. And I did it for a couple moments and right back to my old habits, because it's hard to override that unconscious pattern with
Super
that conscious
difficult.
thought.
Yeah, super difficult. So, let's talk a little bit about the model of the mind, in hypnosis, conscious, unconscious mind, critical faculty, knowns versus unknowns. Why don't you get a little bit into that?
So, as I mentioned, any given second, we have this abundance of information coming in through our senses, and that's consciously done through our auditory, our kinesthetic, our visual, of course, taste and smell as well. That information then goes through a process of filtering, okay? But when looking at the model of the mind, you have basically three distinct areas. You have that conscious critical faculty, which represents maybe, let's say, give or take 10 to 12%, okay? You have the area of the mind that's the oldest part of the mind. It's that primitive area of the mind that's controlling functions in the body like breathing and heart rate, and basically is there for survival, controls the fight or flight, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So it's controlling that aspect. But that big chunk in the middle, which is about 88%, is basically hardware. It's, like hardware. It's all this space. It's all this gigabyte of room that, like you mentioned, during those formative years, as information is getting downloaded. Okay, so let's say, as an example, you're 4 years old, and this actually happened to me, so I'm speaking from a kind of, more personal note here. You played hockey, and every morning on the way to hockey practice or a game, you and your father would stop for a coffee. Yeah. Well, to a 4-year-old boy, that's the coolest thing in the world. Now to a 45, 46-year-old man, I'd have to drink coffee every single morning, because drinking coffee, especially in that context, for me had become known, and it had that strong emotional attachment. Okay. And all of a sudden it plants a seed, and that seed grows. On the other side, you have things that are unknown. Okay. So, fast forward 10, 15 years later, in that subconscious mind, in that hard drive, is you have all these experiences, past experiences, whether good, bad, mundane, tragic, that got labeled either known or unknown. And it's in our ability that we, or in our innate, I guess, coding, that we always wanted to move toward. We want more of those knowns, and we want to repel, and we want to step back, and we want to run away from things that are unknown. So as an example, when let's say you're 25 years old and you want to start losing weight, and you want to start getting fit, and you want to get out there. So you're consciously introducing a thought to the unconscious mind, but in the unconscious mind, that exercising, that losing weight, is an unknown. So it's going to control every aspect of your life, whether you realize or not. It's going to repel you away from doing the things that you should be doing, eating those fresh fruits and vegetables, not overeating or eating when you're upset, emotional eating, or going to the gym, or just sometimes even getting out and taking a walk. And it's going to, I'll do it later. Or, I can't do it right now because they're paving in front of my house, and I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and it's raining. And so you think that we're just delaying it, but it's all being driven by, hey, I don't want it because I don't know what it is I'm going to repel away from.
Yeah, which is super important. And this is why it is so important for people to realize that if they can consciously change kind of the knowns and what is going on and how the mind is responding and driving stuff, because it's propelling you forward.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, the only way to quickly do that really without hypnosis, and I guess it's even an aspect of hypnosis, if you have an external event or an experience that has a very, very strong emotional attachment, it can push through that barrier, that critical faculty. And now that one experience that happened in the flash of probably a couple seconds or a few moments can now become known very, very quickly. But it has to be a very traumatic event. Yeah. Now, that's why, we get into things like, soldiers returning from the war. Obviously, they're not between the ages of 0 and 6 or 7 years old, but they had these experiences that accompanied this strong, traumatic, emotional response that basically thrusted it through that little thin barrier, And now all of a sudden, all these other things become known and unknown that they didn't have obviously prior entering the, the war and service and whatnot.
Yeah. And it becomes, when you look at the order at which these programs are executing, it becomes one of your most important programs.
Correct. Absolutely.
Because it was so traumatic that the body never wants to go through it again.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's going to do anything to avoid pain. So the more painful something is, the higher up it is in this programming.
Yes.
Hierarchy of what programs get executed. So it gets inserted on top.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this stuff I'm just fascinated by it. I always have been. Because
I say the same thing every single day.
Yeah, I mean, for so many people, this is a big opportunity to begin to get in and help rewrite parts of what is their life and change their future in reality.
Yeah. And here's I guess one of the challenges when looking at all this. Someone might want to overcome, or someone might have some problem or challenge in their life. Let's say they can't sleep, or they're having nightmares or whatever, and they're consciously trying to figure out, what's going on? What is this? Where is it coming from? And it's almost like a dog chasing its tail. They just can't get to that answer, because oftentimes that answer is far below that threshold of that conscious awareness. And it's locked in a place where no one can get to, but it's still those air bubbles, let's say, are still filtering up and still sending these whispers and controlling aspects of the lives that they wish it really wasn't.
Yeah. And, the conscious mind actually handles speech.
Correct.
And the subconscious mind, it's not language, it's programming. So, you could talk to it all you want, but that's not how it gets programmed. It gets programmed through experiences.
Absolutely. When even looking at language, people will give you indications, they'll give you clues as to how they're mainly filtering external stimulus. We have what's called a preferred or main representational system, or let's call it a map. We have a main map. Are we seeing the world more through visual means, through auditory, or through kinesthetic? And people will say something, and they're just small little verbal clues like, Frank, I see what you're saying. The word see, that's a visual predicate. It's giving me a little bit of insight into, hey, this person keeps on using visual predicates. So if I want to better communicate with them, I might want to choose visual predicates and frame them and and speak to them in terms that they can understand. Someone could say to you the same thing, I hear what you're saying, or I feel you, giving you indication of what's really going on inside that mind. And, if I want to communicate back to you, whether I'm in a therapeutic situation, a selling situation, I want to frame it in the same way that you're internalizing. And like you said, we're choosing that information. Oftentimes we don't even know how or why we're choosing it.
Yes. And I mean, this is a really important tip that people should take in, because people do have a preferred method of interpreting the world.
Absolutely.
And, they've studied like some of the great movies and books and other things. And in those, they talk to all of these methods of, preferences that people have. They'll use a lot of visualization, the language. And then everybody suddenly is moved by that because they all got spoken to.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting if people do listen and pay attention. I always have. When people start saying, hey, man, I hear you, babe, then that,
right.
Yeah, they tell you right away. I see it. These are really good clues as their preferred method of, taking in information, which is pretty fascinating.
Like,
So
famous line my grandfather used to say, those two are thick as thieves. Thick, that's a kinesthetic, that's a feeling.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it back then, but I'm willing to bet that he was more in the kinesthetic, mode, rather than my grandmother, who was definitely more visual. So it's unique to, learn this information and learn these skills, and then even look back in your own life, and all of a sudden things that had a question mark or things that didn't make sense, all of a sudden start coming together, and you're like, yeah, that really does make sense, and it's a lot easier to understand.
A lot easier to understand. And in fact, this is science. I mean, this stuff has all been, researched. So, let's talk a little bit. We're into this whole notion of maps and filters and stuff, the five senses, VA, KOG. Let's talk a little bit about that so people can get some understanding in this area.
Right. So when looking at maps, it basically boils down to those filters. Okay. We have all this information coming, into our awareness, let's say,
Yeah.
second of every single day. It's coming in only through the five senses. So that's how we as humans are experiencing external reality. We're doing it through these five senses, what we're seeing, what we're tasting, what we're hearing, and whatnot. When looking at that information, after it's gone through that strict filter process, which we mentioned, of generation, deleting and distorting, we basically will form an internal representation based on that filtered information. So as example, there was something that was circulating on the internet back, I don't know how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, where was the dress gold or was it blue? Two distinct colors, and people were seeing two distinct things.
I saw that at the time, and it amazed me.
I don't know how people see gold, because I still see blue.
Absolutely. It was one of those things where even I couldn't believe it, because it was so visual and strong.
Well, then there's the Yanny versus Laurel.
Yes, that's another good one.
I never once heard Yanny. I always hear Laurel, and I've listened to it. I have some NLP training that I do, and that's one of the videos I show. And the basketball one that you had mentioned, Frank, is another one that I show. And every single time, it's the same result. And then you'll have a class of 30, 40 people, and the class is pretty much divided evenly, where half will hear Yanny, some will hear Laurel. I even heard a couple of other people, they heard something different.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Interesting.
So it goes to show you that, that stimulus, that auditory stimulus, is being filtered through those past experiences, and it's being filtered different. Then all of a sudden we arrive at a representation. Oftentimes it's a picture, it's a frame, or it's a feeling inside.
Yeah.
That's filtered through those values and those beliefs. And then what it does is it causes behavior, and we'll react and respond in a certain way based on that internal representation, which then creates personality and so forth and so on down the line. And people like, why are you acting like that? Well, I don't know. Well, here's why. You have to back up.
Yeah, I love these examples because they really do show how people interpret the same thing completely differently. I was hearing Laurel all the time. I could never hear Yanny at all.
Yeah.
And, it was amazing how many people heard Yanny. I'm like, I would just play it over and over going, what? How?
Until I started actually showing it in front of a group of people and reading their body language, and really, I just thought it was just someone, playing a joke. Like, I could record anything. Like, do you hear gorilla or do you hear hockey puck?
Yeah.
and people are like, I hear gorilla. You mean you hear hockey puck? Yeah, I hear hockey puck, but they're really not. They're hearing gorilla. But when actually having people witness it for the first time and watching their response, it's pretty easy to see that, hey, maybe we are filtering more than we come to realize.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very telling. All of these little things like the gorilla and stuff, they wake you up.
Yeah.
And, as people begin to have different interpretations of the world, it makes you step back and just appreciate the fact how we're all different. We have different experiences. We have different representations of the world that have been laid down. And so much miscommunication comes from people not really stepping back and not judging what is going on. Because it's really all judgment that drives a lot of, how people interpret this stuff.
Maybe if people understood this and practiced it and really were able to grasp it, terms like, what's wrong with you? Why are, terms like that maybe being a thing of the past, because now we're all understanding that, we may be all connected, but we're here to experience different things, and we're experiencing it in different ways. And I have the right to hear Yanny or Laurel. You have the right to, miss that moonwalking bear, or, whatever it is, or see gold as opposed to blue. And it's not one way's better than another. It's purely subjective. And if people understand that, then a lot of this miscommunication can maybe be resolved.
That's right. And it's a judgment of what I'm doing is better than what you're doing.
Correct.
And people do want to defend what they're doing, right, all the time, because maybe maybe they were judged a lot as a kid, and then suddenly they're very judgmental about everything, and hey, you're an idiot, you don't hear Laurel, what are you talking about, right?
I think we need to, as each individuals in society and whatnot, is to really understand what it means to just walk a mile in another guy's shoes.
Yes.
Walk a mile in another person's perspective and see it differently. And that's one of the things that therapy and hypnosis has taught me. And, earlier on in my career, someone would come in and they're explaining their problems, their challenges to me. But guess what? I'm still filtering it through my past experiences and my, traumatic or mundane, life. And I had to really, learn and adapt early on to, hey, I need to broaden that perspective. I need to open my mind. I need to really, what's the intention behind those words? And not only that, once I understood that, to be able to regurgitate it and frame it in a way that it can fit seamlessly. It's like a puzzle piece that can fit seamlessly into how they're interpreting and what their main, representational system is. And once I understood and really grasped that, I saw, right before my eyes, miraculous changes.
So what are some of the miraculous changes you've seen as a result of hypnosis? Things that people have come in with that are either, I don't know, really unusual or even normal that they needed to change?
So one of the more common is a lady came to me in her late 70s. She had some heart trouble over the past 6 or 7 years of her life that ended up to needing major surgery, died several times on the table. They brought her back. Okay. There was like a 10% chance that she was going to live. Subsequently, after that, everything, she pulled through, physically recovered, started having nightmares. Okay. Make a long story short, she comes to me for quote unquote nightmares. Well, the heart trouble started when she was 70 years old. She was fine. She was healthy, non-smoker, never drank, led a very, very good life. When the true love of her life gets a hold of her 50, 60, however many years later, on his deathbed.
Oh, no.
Tracked her down through her brother's Facebook account and said, I never loved anybody else. I wanted, I've been searching for you all this time, and literally dies the next day.
Oh my God.
So she comes to me, through the process of discovery and learning more.
Yeah.
Luckily for her, she had the ability to really reach what's called a somnambulistic level, which not everybody can do or can do easily.
And
so
what does that mean? What does that mean?
It's basically getting down to those lower activities of mind, like you said, theta.
Okay.
And being able to be guided into those, those really, really low levels of, if we're looking at the monitor, low levels of brain activity. Well, come to find out, it was an event that took place many, many years prior, that she was 3 or 4 years old. This is when the first time it started. Her mother ties her up in I think it was the 3rd or 4th floor attic of their house to go out and have tea with the ladies.
Oh my God.
No one to watch her. And she's, here's a 77-year-old woman describing the rope as she's actually looking at it. So I thought that was the root cause. Well, that was just part of it. So 3 or 4 sessions later, I'm like, yeah, there's something else going on here. We fast forward to the incident with this gentleman who called her when she was 70 years old. She meets him, they instantly fall in love. He proposes to her. She goes home, tells her mother, hey, such and such, we're getting married, yada, yada. She goes to bed. The mother takes the ring, mails it back to him, pretending to be her. I changed my mind and never want to see you again, never call. So he tried to call and try to get a hold of her, but the mother blocked. And back then, with no social medias and cell phone texting, that was probably a lot harder than kids nowadays realize it. And what she had done moving forward is she just subconsciously packed that in. 60, 70 years later, and all of a sudden, that memory is triggered again with that external trigger, and all of a sudden, she starts having heart problems. So it goes to show you that there's more, neurons, there's more brain cells living in the heart that we, ever knew. And that just shows you the relationship between that, literally broken heart.
A broken heart, yeah.
But she came in for nightmares. She wasn't consciously aware of, oh, it happened because of, this guy, Matt, or this guy, Steve, or, something that happened, the traumatic event that happened to me when I was 3 years old. And then again, when I was 6 years old, she had no conscious recollection of that. Luckily, she was able to get deep enough where that information came out.
Yeah, what an absolutely fascinating story and history. I mean,
Yeah.
real trauma, actually.
I mean,
Real trauma. Tied up by the mother saying you're never going to see this person again, and in her own mind without sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And,
Kind of changed her life.
Most every single time someone comes in for an issue, and I don't know the exact numbers and we've really looked up, but I'm willing to bet it's 80, 85% or even more. It's always something that happened, like you said, Frank, between the ages of 0 and 6 or 7 years old.
Oh, yeah. And oh, go on. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, it goes to show you how true that model of the mind, or what some people will classify as a theory, that we're downloading and we're creating these maps, and then everything else, it's like water passing through that filter. We're just filtering that information. And if that's left unresolved, it could end up as a physical manifestation. It could end up as some type of anxiety disorder. It could really manifest as anything.
It could. And, I think people understand the model now of a phone and an app store, and the fact that you have download this app and it runs, and the app can send you, notifications. The fact of the matter is that, the world in your early life is the app store, and you're downloading these apps and they're running.
Great analogy.
And and it really is true. It is going on. It's sending notifications. I was watching a show. It was a serial killer. They were interviewing him in jail, and he got off strangling women and having sex with them. And they said, where did this come from? And he said he was 6 years old, and a friend was, I guess, strangling a girl, and he witnessed it, this little girl. And somehow that program got downloaded, and he had this desire from that day on. I certainly don't know enough about it, but I immediately thought, oh my God, there's that theta mode. He downloaded this thing. Yeah. And, would he have been that type of individual had he never witnessed that? Who knows? I'm not going to theorize. I have no idea. But it was a strong enough thing. That program, that trauma of him seeing that, created this program rising to the top.
Absolutely.
And one of the ones running in his life. And this is real, and which is why people ought to think about what is running, because there are ways to change these things, and the more they can change them, they can become the better you, which is what this is really all about. Listen, I got to tell you, we're going to have to, it's already, we've already been at this probably, it's a long interview, honestly. Yeah. I think we've been at this, 45 minutes. Yeah. And we're going to come back and do another one. This was really interesting. Next time, we're going to dig a little deeper, Scott. Anything you want to share with the audience as we close episode 1?
Just, to have the sensory acuity, the wherewithal to, broaden that perspective, kind of, be aware that, hey, just because you're witnessing it and you're externalizing it in a certain way may not be the same for everybody else. And just to kind of pause for a few moments, and just to give you time, just to give yourself that critical few moments to think about what you're going to say and think about how it's going to be interpreted. And if you do that and you create that, as you used, habit, that bridge of miscommunication and that bridge of conflict and everything that's going on now can really, really greatly reduce. And, you can see just dramatic results with that. Yeah, just that alone, So I think that's a really, really good tip. And I would say if somebody reacts to something you said in an unexpected way, don't judge it. Just pause for a second. Yeah, pause for a second. Nothing wrong with the pause. That emotional reaction. Press that pause button. I think that's a really important thing to do, because it's a program in them. It's not you. And, right. It may very well, you may learn a better way to say certain things. Absolutely. You get a lot of reactions, but tremendous. So listen, I think this was absolutely wonderful. Great. I'm going to kind of stop the recording. Okay.
and we'll get something scheduled about a month out. How's that?
Excellent. I look forward to it. Thank you
Right.
so much.
Scott, fabulous, buddy. Thank you. Bye.